Alrighty, guys. I'm just out in front of the post office. I just dropped the kids off at school. They just had a dentist appointment this morning. So, sad parent moment. It's hard dropping off your kids when they don't want to leave you. They want to come home, right? Everly was fine. She wanted to go in. Clyde was. He has a little bit of separation anxiety. I think a lot of the times he'd like to just hang out with me at home, but can't always do that. They gotta go to school and learn. So, I'm gonna go to the post office. Another miserable snowy day in Canada here. And we'll get right into the video. See you in a second. Good morning, everybody. We're back in the Bat Cave. Oh man, I tell you, nothing like a nice coffee when you get out of the snow and stuff. So we got all the running around done today. Kids to the dentist, to school. We're off and running. I've already done a couple emails to the municipality and stuff that I need to talk to this morning. So we're good. I got a few things I'm going to list today, guys. Just the small stuff here. Nothing major. A couple video games. No big deal. So, going to do that a little bit later. Today I was going to have a chat with you guys about world news today, and that is the tariffs the U.S. is imposing on Canada, Mexico, and China today. So what this is the U.S. will have a blanket import tax of 25% of goods coming from Canada to the U.S. And it's the same with Mexico. And I believe they've already done 10% on China, and it's an additional 10% today. So it's 20% on top of the already in place tariffs that were for China from years ago. I think China's at like 40 or 50% now. Don't quote me on that, but I could be wrong. So they're going to implement tariffs on the EU as well, from what I hear. There will be 25% as well. What this means to the consumers in the US, we'll get into that first, is that pretty much, I'd say at least half, if not more, of all imports coming into the US are going to have this on it now. So what this means is that the companies are going to either have to try to absorb some of this cost or pass it on to the consumer. And we all know how big business works. I'm going to say at least 90% of this will get passed on to the end consumer. Now, what does that mean for the end consumer? It means that anything that you buy that is not made in the United States is going to have some sort of tariff tax on it. You won't see it. It's just going to end up being very inflationary and raising the prices on these goods. Natural resources, mainly fuel. We'll get into everything else. The U.S. imports a decent amount of oil from Canada. It might not seem like a lot compared to the amount that the U.S. themselves produces, but there's a difference. And the difference is the U.S. produces mostly light crude oil. So it's a very light oil. And when you're pumping this oil, there's different grades and types and this and that. So you have to understand it's not just oil. So Canada's oil is a heavy crude oil. It's much different, and it's used to make different products than the light crude the U.S. mostly produces, we're going to say. I don't believe the U.S. has a huge reserve of heavy crude, so I think that's why they buy most of it from Canada. So the main thing is our economies are so intertwined with this. The heavy crude we send down to the States is refined in the States. It's sold to the States at a discount because we're so close. And then it's sent back to Canada, and we purchase end product from that. The U.S. has more refining capabilities down there. But here's the caveat. The refining capabilities in the States, a lot of it is set up for heavy crude from Canada. And you can't just retrofit these refineries to run light crude through them. So what this means is they're still going to have to take the heavy crude from Canada, and they're just simply going to have to pay 10% more for it. Now, what do you think is going to happen to fuel costs? Or what do you think is going to happen to things that are made out of petroleum products, like tape, bubble mailers, bubble wrap, anything with plastic? Everything is going to get expensive from this, guys. There's no way around it. It's just going to drive the cost up to everything, and as much as manufacturing we might think we have in both countries, we can't just simply flip a switch and say, I'm going to start, making this here now. There's a reason we buy products from China and overseas. It's because they can make it way cheaper than we can, and they can make it way cheaper than we can with a bunch of tariffs on it still. It's not going to change anything. We're not going to start making t-shirts for $1 here. We're not going to start making, these coffee cups for a nickel here. We're not going to make, computer electronics cheap here. Yes, Apple's going to start making some stuff in the States now. All of this is going to drive the price up, guys, because when you have a first world country with our regulations and how much we have to pay people compared to a third world country or even an emerging economy like China, the cost to produce is so much lower that even with tariffs, they can still produce it for a way cheaper price than we can. And that's why you see dollar stores full of Chinese stuff. And that's why you see Walmart's full of Chinese stuff. It's because we simply cannot make it as cheap as they can. And they already have like a 40% tariff on Chinese stuff anyways. And you still see the prices in the store. There's a reason American, Canadian companies can't make these things. So the next little part I'll jump into is how these tariffs are going to work and how duties already work. So if I ship something to the States, there's duties on some products. The end user pays that. Then, I'm not paying it. I may try to absorb it. I usually don't because it is what it is. So, if I send something down there now, there's going to be a 25% extra cost on something. I'm assuming if it goes on used goods and like that. So, if I sell something for $10 now, the end user is going to have to pay $12.50 for that now. Am I going to absorb some of the cost? Maybe. Will I? Yeah, I don't know. Probably not, but I'm just a small fish. But if you have to look at the giant picture with these giant corporations and stuff, I guarantee you they're not absorbing the cost. It's like anything, Ford and, Stellantis and GM, are they going to take a big hit on their vehicles to sell them? Probably not. I don't see why they would. They'll just stick them out there, and at some point people will need cars. Their cars will just quit working and they'll have to pay it, and it's simple as that. And it's unfortunate. I think it's really going to affect our economies in a really negative way. Cause a recession? I believe so, yes. There's already reports coming out of the U.S. that their GDP has actually dropped 2.8% in the past quarter, which was double what they were assuming. I can tell you up here from living in Canada, we've probably been in a recession for a while. It's just the governments don't release the data to back it up. But you can see it yourself. Like, people are more mindful. When you go into a store, people are actually looking at prices now more so. And I'm sure the luxury good market has slowed down. I've noticed my eBay sales have kind of slowed down from last year when I first started it 2 years ago or whatever. 3 years ago was much busier than it is now. So I definitely feel we're going to be headed for a recession, and it's really going to suck. And it's going to suck the life out of reselling too. On the upside, maybe some stuff will get cheaper, like video games and toys I like to collect. But you know how it is. People will just have this stuff. They'll hold on to it until everything rebounds. The next problem is with the vehicles. And it's been explained by some of the larger automakers, mostly domestic ones. So here's the problem, guys. We have plants in, all three countries, Mexico, US, Canada. So what happens here, in Canada, we might build the body of a car, but then we need this part from Mexico, or we need this part from the US. So this part could come up, and then they might do something to the part and even send it back to the originating country and back again. It might go back a few times. It's very inefficient, don't get me wrong, but this is how our car manufacturing has gotten. So the problem here is every time something goes to a different country and crosses that border, it's going to get that tariff. So if it comes from Mexico to the States, it gets a tariff. So now the States says, well, we need to send this to Canada, get this part put onto this. It goes to Canada. It gets something put on it. It comes back down. Guess what happens? 25% tariff. If it has to go back to Mexico again, 25%. So think about this. The US automakers are saying this could literally add $12,000 to the cost of the average vehicle within a couple of weeks. Think about that. $12,000 on an already insanely priced vehicle in 2 to 3 weeks. Like, that's going to be wild, guys. When you think about shipping costs, like, these companies need to buy vehicles. They need to buy fuel. They need to buy everything. Like, so it's going to start from the ground up. The fuel's going to become more expensive. You know, transportation's going to be more expensive, and everything's just going to. It's going to be. There's going to be super inflation. And anyone who doesn't think there isn't is dreaming. Like, if they think this is going to make a big manufacturing boom in Canada and the States, there's no way that's going to happen, guys. This is not, the 1950s anymore. It just doesn't work that way. Our wages have gotten to the point where we can't just do that and make products that are lower priced for the most part. Now, there is better stuff produced in both countries. I'll give you an example. I watch a YouTuber. He buys mostly Chinese skid steers and little hose and stuff to work around his house. And he said, I'm very patriotic. I will buy at home if I can afford to. But, the skid steer, for example, he has the prices for them. It was like $6,000, and it's a good little skid steer, works perfectly fine. A comparable one from John Deere or Cat or something in the States is $40,000, and the one from China is $6,000. And you're going to say, well, yeah, the one from China is a lower quality. The ones from the U.S. are much better, and I'm in agreement. However, how many $6,000 skid steers can you buy compared to one $40,000 one? You could buy 5 or 6 of those and then add the tax. You could literally buy 5 or 6 of those for the same price of this one. This is why the manufacturing might is not coming back to our countries, guys. And it's whoever believes this, they're dreaming. It will not happen. I'm sorry. Like, they're making cars in China for like $10,000, and look at the cars we get stuck with here. A friggin' $40,000 Hyundai Elantra. Are you kidding me? Like, get the heck out of here. Like, it's a shame. I don't understand the reasoning behind this, and I know I'm ranting on here, and you've probably clicked off the video already, and that's fine. But I've seen the 80s. I lived through pre-free trade, and I've seen free trade, and there is upsides and downsides to both. I'm not going to disagree, but this fallacy that we're going to start some big manufacturing boom, forget about it. It's not a reality. Just get into one more little thing before I can this video, because I know it's totally kind of off the rails a little bit on what my channel's about, and I don't want to get into a big political fight. I'm sure I'm going to get flamed in the comments for some opinions in that. Our way of life in the West has switched, and this I've noticed a lot more lately. So take, for instance, when I was a young lad in the 1980s, which was the best decade, I'm going to say, ever. You may disagree. But anyways, when I was a young lad in the 1980s, we would rent a VCR, and we were poor. We couldn't afford to buy a VCR. And that sounds a little silly now, but back in the 1980s, think about this, and especially if inflation adjusted, a VCR would run you like $900, $1,000 for a VCR. A decent TV would run you $1,000. I mean, I grew up on a black and white TV about this big with the dial on it. So now jump fast forward to today. A 50-inch flat screen TV is, $300-$400, maybe cheaper on Black Friday. So what has happened to our economies is we've switched from having expensive luxury items to having cheap luxury items in a certain context, to having expensive food, fuel, necessities that used to be cheap. And like, as an example, anyone who remembers back in the olden days, hydro, heating oil, gas, all of that was cheap. Commodities were cheap back then. Food was comparatively cheaper back then. We we're terribly poor, but we always had food on the table, you know. But now, for the price of that $400 flat screen, you know, I'll go to the grocery store and buy two small bags of groceries, and it's $150. So you think $400 for a flat screen or $400 a week for groceries? That's absurd, guys. That is absolutely absurd. Like, think of the inflation on this stuff. Why is this stuff so expensive, but that luxury item is so much cheaper? Like, you know, it's just, I don't know. Everything's gotten flipped upside down, and I don't know if it's how capitalism's supposed to be working. But I don't, yeah, I just don't think it's sustainable. And, you know, I like reselling on here and chatting about that with you guys, and it's fun. And it kind of takes my mind off this stuff. But I worry about it for our kids. I worry about it for, you know, even my parents or, you know, everybody. Like, something's got to change here. And putting tariffs on stuff that, you know, the US, for example, you guys import a ton of food from the Mexico that you simply cannot produce enough of and grow enough at a cheap enough rate to feed the country. So that's just going to add further onto this inflationary system we've had in place for the past 5 years, guys. I'm sorry. It's not going to work. I'm really sorry I rambled on in this video. I'm sure there's a ton of other points and stuff, but to me, these tariffs are really going to hurt reselling in general, and it's going to hurt business in general, in my opinion. I'm a Reagan, you know, I wouldn't say I'm a conservative. I'm very moderate. I'm not liberal. I'm not conservative. I'm more of a centrist, you know. Yeah, less government regulation on some things is good. There has to be some social safety nets, but it doesn't need to be abused. You know, we're firearm owners. You know, we hunt. You know, we fish. We do all that stuff. We believe in, you know, rights for people. You know, I believe a lot of people are like us, but we're the ones who have gotten drowned out in all this political silliness. Um, you have to just stay out of the way of people, and you have to let our economies work as best they can in the situation we are in. Thing is, I agree, do need to change, but these tariffs are not going to help anyone, guys. And I'm really worried about the future of both of our countries for my children. I know we've personally canceled a trip to the States. We were going to go in a week in March break. We were going to go down to Myrtle Beach, Charleston, and just, you know, we're a few hours east of Toronto, so we're literally 40 minutes from the border. So we are well familiar with the United States, but we simply canceled it because we have a feeling that if we go down there, we're not going to be greeted the same way we would have been, you know, a couple of years ago. Like we go through the States almost every year, guys. And I'm worried for our family. You know, our dollar's taking a bit of a shit kicking. I think it's down to 68 cents on the dollar now. And the last time we went through, which about a year and a half ago, through Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and northern Michigan, the prices were on par with Canadian prices or higher. So there's really no sense. There's no cost savings. The only thing we found cheaper was gas with the exchange rate. So I'm just going to give you one quick example before I finish this video, guys. We stopped at a Culver's, I think, in Wisconsin. It's awesome. We love it, and it's always one of the treats we get when we go that way. It cost us around $40 for two regular combos, like just two cheeseburger combos and two kids hamburgers. It was $40 US. And then with the exchange rate, we're like, that literally cost us $60 Canadian for that. And we think about that and we're like, you know, we could eat at a sit down restaurant in Canada way cheaper than that. You know, like, it's crazy. Like, I think if, you know, for 40 or $50, if you go to certain sit down restaurants, you get a really awesome meal for around the same price, guys. I don't get it. And don't get me wrong, our fast food prices here are getting really stupid too. But it's just, I remember when we used to go down the States and stuff was substantially cheaper on everything, but it really is not anymore. And I think you're going to see a lot of Canadians choose not to go down there as much or anymore in general, especially like to Disney and stuff like that. That's an expensive trip, right? So we'll see how it plays out. If you want to flame me in the comments, go ahead. I'm fine with it. If you agree with me, let me know too. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'm going to keep making my eBay videos and my hiking stuff and my G.I. Joe stuff. I hope you guys are enjoying the channel. We just hit 8,000 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. I will see you in the next one, and everyone have a good day, and I hope it all works out. See ya!